Hey everybody, we have finally neared the end of our Good and the Beautiful Language Arts for Kindergarten and our Good and the Beautiful Math for Kindergarten. These are the two that we have stuck with this year for homeschooling. We only have about 3 or 4 lessons left to the end. We homeschool year round, so our goal is to finish by the end of July, and then we'll pick back up with our first grade curriculum, which will be different for next year in August. So we're almost done with those, so I wanted to give kind of a little rundown of how things went, why we will not be sticking with the Good and the Beautiful for next school year, pros, cons, and then what we're switching to. So first of all, we did start the year with the math and then also the kindergarten language arts. And then I did like it at first, so I went on and added the science curriculum, which I'll do a walkthrough of all of these too. That was one thing that I really liked when I was searching for curriculum, or the walkthrough videos. So here's the science. It's little hearts and hands, and then along with this science came the big book of science stories. So these two went together. I will say we were not as consistent with the science. I kind of just tabbed lessons here and there, but we did not end up finishing this, which I will get into that a little later. So let me just talk about my overall experience with the Good and the Beautiful. Let's just stick with language arts. So if you don't already know, I taught first grade in public school for 6 years, and then I moved up and taught 5th grade for a couple years before I decided to stay home with my girls and homeschool. So I kind of feel like I have a good understanding of what kids here in Florida needed in the first grade and what they were lacking by the time they got to 5th grade, maybe some gaps that weren't filled along the way. So when I jumped to 5th grade, I really started noticing those gaps and things that need to be filled in. First grade wise though, my first graders here in Florida, we were doing the Common Core standards at the time, and they were expected to know a lot for their little young ages, I thought. So when we started the Good and the Beautiful kindergarten curriculum, I was a little underwhelmed at first because it does start very slow. It does start with almost like a review of letter sounds at first. Like we start with 2-letter words here. This is lesson 1, and you can see the 2-letter words. I do have to keep reminding myself though that this is kindergarten, not first grade. So a lot of times I will compare my daughter's progress now in kindergarten to that of my first graders that I had when I taught. So I really try not to do that. But I did think it started off a little slow. As we progressed, I really got a taste of that spiral method, which I have now learned I am not the greatest fan of. One example that I would notice is okay, we would be doing ED endings one day, and then the next day we would be switching over to digraphs, and then we'd go back to the ED endings maybe 3 or 4 weeks later, and I just felt like there was not a lot of practice for my daughter. Another thing that I have heard a lot of other homeschool moms say that I noticed myself is that the Good and the Beautiful has a lot of what we call fluff. So especially in math, which I'll get to that, but instead of just getting to the point or getting to what the topic is, there's a lot of stories and characters and a lot of building up to whatever the skill is for that day. Some kids might learn best with that. My daughter and I, we were just okay, let's get to the point. Love the beautiful illustrations. That's one thing I will say. The Good and the Beautiful did a great job of the colorful illustrations, and they did change it up a lot too. So you can see here is a cut and paste activity, and these only came about once, I don't know, every month or so. It wasn't something we were doing every day. They did infuse some geography in with some of their literature stories, and I would say that this is pretty comprehensive as far as it hits the phonics, it hits the grammar, it hits the spelling, it hits the comprehension. It is good in that sense. I just felt like we were skipping around a lot, okay? We're bouncing back and forth from different skills, and like I said, going back to them, maybe 6 or 7 days later, and if you're doing a 4-day homeschool week, it seems like eternity. So we do 1 to 2 lessons a day, and here we are. We started in August, and here we are in June, and we're just finishing. Although we did take quite a few breaks in between. Overall, I feel like it's a good start, But my daughter, she's a pretty advanced reader. Several times I thought about skipping over to the first grade book, which I did buy that one. It was on sale. But I didn't because I was afraid of those gaps. So we stuck with the kindergarten, and we're nearing the end now, and she's done really, really well. I just don't like the fluff, and I don't like how often it seemed like we were skipping around from different skills. And I understand the value of the spiral method, but this was almost to an extreme. It's like spiraling back and forth, and it became confusing. This is also the older version. That's super important to note. So if you notice, this is level K, Good and the Beautiful, and it might look different than what you have or what you're purchasing if you're looking into it. They changed their entire curriculum, and you should really look into that if this is a company that you're considering, because from what I understand, they worded it differently on the website and all the emails that they sent, but basically I got the gist that they were revamping all of their curriculums to meet more of like state and federal standards, like kind of like Common Core, but not exactly, which to me meant they were dumbing it down. They did not say that, but that is the way that I took it. So I went ahead and when all of the older versions, which are more advanced or move a little quicker, were on sale, I just went and bought them. So I have the kindergarten, the first, the second, and the third. Ironically, we will not be sticking with the Good and the Beautiful. So I will have all those. Maybe my 3-year-old coming up will use them or something. But if you are purchasing the Good and the Beautiful this year, even at the end of last year, you will be purchasing the new version, which again has been revamped. Some people love it. Some people say it's a little bit too easy now that they've dumbed it down a little bit. So I have the older version. The last thing I want to say about LanguageArts is that it does come with these little paper readers, and when I first got this set, these all just came on sheets of paper and I had to cut them and staple them, and I was really frustrated. But actually, now that I've seen how often we use these, I appreciate that they're just kind of like flimsy little stapled books, because I'm constantly pulling them out, putting them in to her book bins, independent reading time, shared reading time, and we do use these a lot, and the words in these readers do match the lesson for the day. So I appreciate that. I like that cohesiveness. And there's a lot of these. Okay, so we are pretty much done. We only have a few lessons left. So I think this was our last one today, our last independent reader. Okay, so LanguageArts. Prose, colorful, beautiful illustrations, covers all bases. Quick to finish, but not as to the point as we would want it. So cons would be a lot of fluff, the spiral method to an extreme, not reviewing a concept long enough before moving on to the next one, doing assessments at the end of each unit that I felt like hadn't hit skills for a while, and then they assess the kids on it towards the end. Those are optional, by the way. You don't have to do those. Overall, I would not be completely opposed to using the Good and the Beautiful again in the future. My daughter loved the colorful illustrations, but for LanguageArts, we will not be moving on with it, at least not for first grade. So we're moving into first grade next, and we're going to explore something else, which I will explain that later. Okay, let's talk about math. So the Good and the Beautiful math has been more of a struggle for me to get on board with than it was for the LanguageArts. The LanguageArts, like, I felt like I could keep trucking throughout each week, and I was good. I had some complaints, but overall I was good. The math, I cannot tell you how many times I have shut this book and thought, we are never opening this book again. Keep in mind, again, I taught first grade for a very long time. Common Core, state standards, which I'm not a fan of, but I feel like my students were able to pick up on concepts pretty quickly, and by the time they got to first grade, they were able to do far above the skills that are being taught in this kindergarten math book. So in other words, I feel like this is way too easy. Now, I am in Florida, so keep that in mind. If you're listening from another state, your standards are different. I also have high expectations for my own daughter, as most of us I'm sure do, and this was way too easy. So I just want to give a few examples. First of all, you get this big math book, which is great because it's just open and go, right? You don't have like a separate thing. It's separate teacher's guide or anything. Everything is in there. You also get a math box. Hold on, let me go get that. Okay, so you get this wooden math box here, which is super cute. And inside the math box, it has everything you can imagine. It has these number dice, it has money, it has counting sticks, it has these little cars that my 3-year-old has now taken out. And you can just, you know, throw this box in your purse and take your kids to the library or whatever, and you have everything you need. As far as the skills, so my daughter and I, she just turned 6, and we can cover like 3 lessons a day, and you're really only meant to do 1 lesson a day. So that's what I'm saying as far as like how simple it is. When they start, so I'm just going to go, I'll do a flip through of this too in the future. They start with numbers 1 to 3. So they're learning how to count to 3. They're tracing numbers 1 through 3. They're identifying 1 through 3. And then, you know, the next week they'll add on. We'll do 4 through 6. And then the next week, 7 through 10. And then eventually we get to the double-digit numbers. But here we are. We're at the end of it. Okay. And today, let me just show you today's lesson. This is what drives me nuts. So we are on lesson 97. Here it is. This is today's lesson. So lesson 97, which is almost the end of kindergarten going into 1st grade. And today's lesson, which we didn't even do, she was supposed to take her little car and drive down the road and stop at each shape and name the shape. So it's a geometry skill, but okay, she's been able to name these shapes since she was like 3 years old. So every child's different though. That is how it was for us. I just thought it was way too easy. I can't tell you how many times we would like get to a lesson and just roll our eyes, and I would just put a big X through it. Okay, the fluff that I described in the language arts book is 10 times worse in the math. And some kids, they thrive on that. They want the story behind it. They want to, you know, connect with the characters before we do the math problem. But today, we were doing ordinal numbers, 1st, 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. And it's this whole long story about Luke and his dad, and they're going to build a tree house, and they need all these things, and here's their list. First, we need to draw out a plan. Second, we need to get supplies. And really, it's just preparing them to read the ordinal numbers on the ladder later. But we had to go through this whole story first. So my daughter and I were just like, we crossed it out, and we didn't even do it. This is important. I need to say this in my other videos too. I did pay money to have my daughter MAP tested. So it's with the NWEA, the MAP growth test, which is something we used to use in Florida and we don't really anymore, but I loved it as a teacher. And you take it 3 times a year, beginning, middle, and end. And with us using the Good and the Beautiful consistently throughout the year, she has shown extensive growth each time with that. And that is a national test. So she is compared to all of her peers at the same age and the same grade, and she's scoring like 80, 90th percentile. Not actually 90th percentile for both reading and math. So it's got to be working. I'm doing a lot of stuff outside of Good and the Beautiful too, but I don't know, the Good and the Beautiful, it is beautiful, it is good, but it's not great. So that's it for math. I think I'm gonna stop it there. Questions, comments, anything that I need to add to this? I know I'm trying to like ramble super fast. What we are switching to, I have been dying the last several weeks because when you start searching for curriculum, talk about a rabbit hole. It is like I go to bed dreaming every night of whatever curriculum I was looking up hours before bed. And then the next morning I wake up and I think like, okay, that's the one I'm going to get. And then I see another video a few hours later of another curriculum and I'm set that that's the one I'm going to get. So I'm having a really hard time with commitment. So far, I am looking into Christian Light Education, so CLE. They're the little mini workbooks that you can just hand to them for each unit. They finish it, and then they graduate that workbook and get the next one. I think that would be a good confidence booster for my daughter because it's like, yay, I'm moving up to the next workbook. So that's what I'm looking into. I'm really starting to explore the Charlotte Mason method, which goes against everything I ever learned as a public school teacher and as a public school student. But it's really intriguing. So I'm looking into A Gentle Feast. Gather Round is another one I've been looking into, but I kind of got some vibes from that one. That's a whole nother story. Math UC, I am 100% going with for math. Like that is decided. Math UC is it. I am so impressed. I can't believe I've never heard of it before. It's mastery based. So I have learned through all of this exploration that I am more of a mastery based type learner. Doesn't mean my daughter is though, and doesn't mean my other children are going to be. So we're gonna try it out. Good and the Beautiful with Spiral. Neither of us seem to care for that much, but now we're gonna try this mastery-based approach with the Math You See, and I'm super excited. So any recommendations you have for me as far as like, I'm looking language arts, reading, science. Good and the Beautiful science is good, but it kind of bounces all over the place too, like their other stuff. Phonics. And I'm going to have a video soon because I won a raffle at a homeschool convention, and I won an entire year of a Becca first grade curriculum. The entire thing, all the books, all the spirals, all the teacher books, all the DVDs, everything. So you might be thinking, well, why don't you just go with a Becca? You got the whole thing for free. It's because I was already exploring the Charlotte Mason method prior to, and a Becca is definitely not Charlotte Mason. So I might kind of dabble in both. And I will be doing an unboxing of my Becca curriculum that's coming. I'm super excited for it. Who knows? Maybe I will just end up with a Becca. I don't know. Okay, I'm rambling now. I'm done. Questions, comments, concerns, and I will also be doing flip throughs in my next video of these curriculums.